Welcome to the Integrative Connections podcast, a wellness podcast for both pets and people.
I'm Dr. Angie Stamm.
I'm Kaela McGuire. And today we're talking about natural pet remedies. So you might have things around the house that you can use to help heal your pets. And Dr. Angie has lots of fun things to share with us today, and I'm really excited to pick her brain.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, ask away.
So why should pet owners even consider natural remedies versus the more traditional? I mean, I know there's a time and a place for both, but when can a pet owner consider more holistic approaches for their pets?
Well, generally, a lot of the items that we're going to talk about today are you already have in your home. You don't have to go out to the store and buy something new. They're less potential for toxicity and side effects. Less chance of an allergic reaction, and generally super safe and gentle.
Are there any key principles that pet owners should keep in mind when it comes to what they're dabbling in or what ingredients they're using?
I mean, generally it's use common sense. It's if there's something that you wouldn't use on yourself, then don't use that on your animal. I mean, there's a few ingredients like xylitol and of course foods like raisins and chocolate that you would want to avoid in pets. Of course, those aren't really medicinal anyway, but I guess there's some over-the-counter products that have xylitol, so you'd want to watch out for that. Okay. But otherwise, if it's something natural that you would use on yourself, it's generally going to be safe. Of course, check with your vet or us, but generally going to be safe for your animal as well.
Okay. And I think the most common, especially right now with spring and everything, is going to be flea and tick medicine. Mm-hmm. And I personally don't love to prescribe my dog that. So what can I use instead?
Yeah, the chemical-based flea and tick medications can have a lot of potential side effects and toxicity for the environment, for the human exposures too, especially the topical products. I worry about the humans getting exposure to that too. And then of course, whether it's given orally or topically, it all ends up in the environment and then that builds up. So the more we can rely on natural products, the better. Of course, they're not always 100% effective. So there's always that balance, right? But we do use in our practice a lot of essential oil-based products, topical products that for animals that don't have a huge burden of flea and tick that can work well. Wondercide is one product that is pretty effective. It comes in a spray, a spot on, and a collar.
Oh, wow.
And so with the sprays, you really want to make sure you lather those on well into the fur, inside the feet, and you have to reapply them every day or two in heavy exposure areas. So that's the downside. But they do act as a repellent where a lot of the chemical-based products that we give are not repellents. So the flea and ticks still have to get on the animal to be killed. So they can still drag them into your house potentially. And none of them work, except for one product, work for mosquitoes. So that's another benefit of the essential oil products that are acting as repellents.
Well, I imagine you can just get in the routine of, as you're putting the leash on the dog, you can spray the dog before you go outside. Correct. Or if you're going out, to barbecue or whatever, just have it by the door. There are ways that you can remind yourself.
And those are things that you can use on yourself as well. So if you're going for a hike, you can spritz yourself down with those things as well, or your pants, your pant legs.
And is there anything that you can feed your pets that will, emit an odor or something like that to detract pests?
Yeah, there are actually several foods that you can use that there is some evidence that they can act as mild repellents. One of them is garlic. And garlic is available. You can use it as fresh garlic. You can buy it in different products, like dried garlic products. Springtime makes one called Bug Off, and it's just a powdered garlic. But garlic has a bad rap for being toxic because it is in the onion family, and onions are toxic in large amounts. They can cause an oxidative stress to the red blood cells of dogs and cats, and that can cause a Heinz body anemia. So you do have to be careful with onions, but garlic tends to not do that. So it's a little bit of a myth. I suppose if you fed tons and tons of it, it could be a problem, but the amounts that we're using for flea and tick and anti-parasitic and cancer prevention type doses are just fine. In fact, they have health benefits. So garlic's one of them. Apple cider vinegar is another one. I would recommend you do organic raw apple cider vinegar. You can just put that in the food. I
was going to ask, won't pets be, my dog's a little bit picky, so he would smell that. Do you think that that's an issue?
Yeah. Some of them may not like the flavor.
Okay.
You could start slow and kind of get them adjusted to it, but it has other health benefits as well. It creates more stomach acid, creates more acidity in the stomach, which can help with digestion. It also can help with joint inflammation and metabolism. So there's some other health benefits there.
Okay.
Brewer's yeast is another one that's in a lot of different natural flea and tick supplements that you can just buy that separately and sprinkle it on the food. Rich in B vitamins. And also coconut oil given internally can actually fed to the animal can help to repel parasites.
Really?
External parasites and internal, and it's antifungal as well.
Oh, very
And it helps to support the thyroid.
Okay. Well.
So all of these things, even though they're being used for one benefit, they can have other actions that are helpful for them, which is kind of fun. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask, what is a good starting point first aid kit for pet parents to have? And it sounds like those are definitely things that they probably already have.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people have those already in their pantry. So activated charcoal is one that is really good to have around for diarrhea. That's a good one. I always travel with it myself in case of traveler's diarrhea, or some kind of food poisoning issue.
Yeah.
That's a really important one, and it's so safe.
Yeah.
You can get it anywhere, so it's easy. Calendula topically is really good for any kind of skin irritation. Arnica is a great one to have for any pain or bruising. That's for us too.
Okay.
If you're doing nail trimming at home on your dog or cat, then I would have some cornstarch or baking soda handy in case you do get a little too short and you have a little bleeding.
Okay.
You can just pack that with those.
Yeah.
So those are some thoughts. And CBD is generally something that a lot of people have around, and that's good for any kind of inflammation, pain, anxiety, restlessness, sleep issues. So those are all great to have around.
I know you've mentioned it in past episodes, but colloidal silver, I use that daily with my dog because he has allergies, so he scratches his face a lot.
Okay.
And so I just spray it pretty much every single morning.
Yeah, colloidal silver can be used topically in any of the orifices safely. So you can use it literally in the eyeball. You can use it in the nostrils. You can use it in the mouth. I use it for gum inflammation on patients. You can use it on wounds.
Wow.
And you can use it internally as well for infections. So it's basically an antibiotic, a natural antibiotic. There's some thought that if you're giving high doses internally for a long time, that could have a negative impact on the microbiome. So, I would say topical use you can be more liberal with.
Right.
Internal, you want to be a little bit more aware of, or maybe talk to your vet about using it if you're going to use it long term as an internal supplement.
Okay. And then if you were to use it short term, would it be if they have a wound that's trying to heal, you would use it for the duration of that healing process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Use it like you would Neosporin or something like that.
Okay. I'm talking internally.
Oh, sorry, internally. Yeah. If they had an external wound, you could use it internally, but I think it would probably be more effective in that circumstance just as a topical.
Just as a topical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any reasons why you would use it internally?
I'm thinking, more things like upper respiratory infections, colds, viruses, pneumonia, things like that.
You don't think of your pets getting colds?
They do. Well, cats certainly get upper respiratory infections.
Okay.
And some of those cats have actually a chronic viral infection that lives in their body that will come out, like a herpes virus will flare up periodically. And so you could use it for that, even though it is, it is a virus, and colloidal silver is not necessarily antiviral, but then sometimes they get a secondary bacterial component to that. So it's something that you could use.
So what about heartworm?
Heartworm is a worm a parasite worm that's transmitted by mosquito bites.
Okay.
And you can actually look up the heartworm map Depending on where you live, you can look up the heartworm map and see how risky it is in your area. The south, warm, humid environments tend to have the worst heartworm incidence. It's pretty bad in the southern states. Here in Northern California, it's some risk, but it's a fairly low risk depending on where you are. Okay. And there's only, at least here in this part of the country, there's only certain species of mosquitoes that can actually transmit it, and it's the ones that live in the tree holes.
Wow, that's very interesting.
There's a lot of different products that can kill heartworms. They're pretty easy to kill. Ivermectin is one of them, and that is in a product called HeartGuard. There's some resistant strains that are maybe a little bit not as sensitive. They're not as easily killed off by the ivermectin, and so there are some stronger medications that you can get from your vet for that, depending on your animal's risk factor. Cats can get heartworm too, but there's no treatment for that. So if you have you can treat dogs if they do get it. In cats, we just basically manage them, and then it can be dangerous, but eventually the worms die off and they can do okay. So if you have an outdoor cat, you definitely want to think about heartworm preventative for them as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm thinking about the time of year again, and it's rattlesnake season. So I've heard, of the rattlesnake shot, the vaccine, but if you aren't huge on vaccines, is there anything that we can do for that in short term other than like rush to the hospital?
That's a hard one, but there are rattlesnake avoidance training classes that you can take to essentially train the dog, for dogs, of course, not cats, but to train the dogs to recognize a snake visually and then leave it alone. So that's probably the safest way to go. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. The rattlesnake vaccine is available with, may or may not be helpful, and we can see reactions to that. So I think it's a case by case on that one too.
Okay. Yeah. And if you're taking your pup on a hike and they get a little cut, then what would you recommend that you have in your backpack?
I think that you could use your colloidal silver. That would be a good one to have, and that's easy to carry around. You can just use a regular antibiotic ointment, like a Neosporin, and you could use coconut oil, but I would probably just keep some Neosporin and or colloidal silver around for those types of things.
And what about diatomaceous earth? I've heard that you can use that for pets.
Yeah, you can use that. Diatomaceous earth are basically microscopic fossil-like, under a microscope they look like little shards of sharp glass, and so microscopically they poke holes into the parasites, either internal or external parasites. So, but it basically comes as a very fine dust. A lot of people use it as a perimeter around their homes to deter pests, insects from coming in. So that's probably the best way to do it. There are people that use it topically on the pet's fur. I don't recommend that so much because you don't want to inhale it, and it is very fine. The dust is really fine, so you want to be really careful not to aerosolize it and have you or the animal breathing it in. Okay. So I don't love using it like topically. I think the best use for that would be as a perimeter, like around your sidewalks or things like that, where you don't want ants crossing into your home. Or
okay, that's really good to know because I have used it topically.
Yeah.
But that does make sense. I had no idea that it was like shard because it's so soft.
It feels soft.
Yeah.
You can use it internally as well as a natural antiparasite.
Okay. Both pets and people, right?
Yeah. But I think there's other probably better options.
Yeah. And what about dental health? What's the natural way that you can keep your...
There's a lot of different things. I think the first thing is look at the diet and make sure that the animal's on the best diet, the most anti-inflammatory, freshest diet that you can afford to do, because that really impacts the oral microbiome in a good way. And those pets tend to build up less plaque and tartar. So there's kind of this myth that, my dog or cat needs to eat kibble to clean its teeth. And that's just like kind of telling you like, here, chew on this cookie and it'll keep your teeth clean. It doesn't really work that way. And I think that's a big myth out there. And in fact, kibble diets can certainly change the microbiome in the mouth in a negative way, as well as impact the rest of the health in a negative way. So I think a fresh diet, getting as much fresh food in as you can, that's super helpful. Daily brushing, even if it's just without toothpaste, just with you can use a baby toothbrush. I wouldn't use the finger brushes. They're okay, but the bristles are kind of short and stubby, so they don't tend to get under the gum line as well as like a toothbrush. So I would just get, like, for most size animals, a baby infant toothbrush. That works pretty well. Perfect. Just at the dollar store or whatever. And then if they'll let you, if you can train them to use like a Sonicare ultrasonic toothbrush, that works great too. Wow. It's a little noisy and kind of, weird at first, but that would be really great. So the smaller breed dogs and certain cats do tend to build up more tartar than the large breed dogs and have more periodontal disease. So for those pet parents, it's probably even more important to look at trying to institute daily brushing if you can. I mean, I don't brush my dog's teeth, but it works really well. I can definitely tell the difference with clients that brush their dog's teeth. Oh, wow. And I don't have a lot of them. Not many are that motivated, but the ones that do, you can definitely tell that those animals have way less periodontal disease. So I think it makes a big difference. Yeah.
And can you make your own toothpaste at home?
Yeah, I usually tell people to use coconut oil and baking soda mixed together. It's super inexpensive and easy and works great. Has other health benefits to the microbiome. Yeah. And
what about different bones or different things to chew on? Because I know greenies probably aren't the best, but those are the most popular.
Yeah, greenies are super popular, and I don't love the ingredients in those. They're pretty inflammatory, and they have a lot of calories, kind of empty calories. And so I would stick with more natural things. There is a brand that I like as an alternative to the greenies. It's called VetraScience Perio Chews. And they kind of look like a greenie, but they have much healthier ingredients. So if you're addicted to that little green shape, that's kind of an option. Okay. There's a lot of good products out there. I like, personally, for my dogs, frozen chicken feet. Okay. Just keep them. They're inexpensive. You can buy them at usually like Asian grocery stores. Keep them frozen, and I just feed them frozen and, of course, raw. And the bones in there are very small, so when they ingest them, they're not going to cause any problem. It's a really good collagen source and mineral source, as well as teeth cleaner. You can use poultry necks, raw poultry necks, chicken or turkey necks, as a meal replacement and also a teeth cleaning strategy. Okay. If you're comfortable with that. Not everybody's comfortable with that. And of course now with the bird flu stuff, that's a little bit more controversial, but that's an option. You can use raw marrow bones. Some people are comfortable with those. I personally do occasionally feed raw marrow bones to my dogs. They can break teeth on those. And so if you have a breed or a specific dog that is an aggressive chewer, a lot of times just the bigger, stronger dogs or bully breeds, the ones with really strong bite forces, those guys are going to be more at risk for breaking teeth on something hard. It could be anything, though. It could be a stick that they find in the yard. I've seen them break teeth on nyla bones. I've seen them break teeth on bully sticks. So you just never know. There's always some risk. But the marrow bones, of course, have great nutrition, minerals, and then the marrow has super, high nutrient density. You have to be careful with certain animals that are going to be sensitive to the fat. They can get diarrhea from that if it's too rich for them. Okay. And so I usually, that's a use with caution category. Right. But yeah, and then I sometimes will tell people to use just a raw carrot or raw celery stick. And if they don't like those, you can try soaking them in bone broth, and that might help kind of encourage them to chew on that.
there's a little more flavor.
Exactly.
A little more salt.
Just to give it some flavor.
Yeah. And back to the poultry next. If a dog has an allergy to chicken, is that going to trigger that allergy?
It could. And it's going to be like, usually the allergies or sensitivities are to the muscle protein. So a neck's going to have some flesh meat on it, right? Versus a foot, which is maybe less allergenic. I don't know. I mean, but yes, I mean, definitely those are going to be a use with caution in the poultry sensitive animals. You can get pork neck bones from butchers. That's an option. And then you can go with the beef bones. I do see a lot of clients using the deer antlers and the Himalayan yak chews for treats. Those are super popular and they last a long time. But those are the hardest of all the things that we've mentioned. And I find that those have the highest risk of breaking teeth. So I would definitely use those with caution with aggressive chewers. Yeah.
And we have a whole episode on arthritis and joint health. But just to recap, you mentioned frozen sardines in that episode because of the omegas and things like that. Is that also going to help with dental health?
Yeah, because it's got a lot of, they're going through the skin layer. There's some bone in there, and raw bone in general, it's fine as long, it's not going to cause a perforation risk. It's just the cooked bones that you don't want to feed, especially the cooked poultry bones, which are super dangerous. But yeah, raw sardines can be fed defrosted or frozen or sliced up, depending on the size of your animal. And that's a super nutrient dense food. It's really like it's a whole complete meal, really. Yeah.
And we also have a full episode on diet, but just to give a little nutshell, what are some anti-inflammatory treats that you can give your pets?
So the sardines are great. Any kind of fruits or vegetables that they want to eat is fine, except for onions and grapes, essentially. You can do freeze-dried organ meats are super popular and healthy and nutrient dense. And a lot of food manufacturers are coming out with organ treats, freeze-dried liver, freeze-dried hearts. The trachea, there's dried tracheas now, which is a super good chondroitin source, good for their joints. So I would try to, stick with those, either fruits, veggies, organs, protein-based treats. Yeah.
I had a friend who worked at a pet store, a friend's daughter actually worked at a pet store, and she had little freeze-dried chicken hearts that she was feeding her cat, and she gave one to each of my dogs, and I just saw how much they love them that I looked up the brand. It's Vital Essentials, and I highly recommend that brand. Do you recommend that brand? Vet approved. Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of different things that I feed my dogs from that brand. So.
Yeah, and the organ meat, organs are essentially go back to a therapy that's pretty ancient called glandular therapy, and so it's feeding the organ that's diseased in the body, or whatever. Feeding a heart will support the heart. It's got all the nutrient cofactors to support that tissue. So freeze-dried hearts as a treat is really good for your pet's heart.
Love that.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yep. What are some compresses that pet owners can create for their pets' achy joints, like castor oil or...
I haven't used a lot of castor oil topically. I think, I don't have a lot of clients doing topical compresses. We tend to do more like internal anti-inflammatories, but you could use topical CBD products on joints. You just have to probably shave the fur off, which makes it a little trickier. And then they could ingest it. So just make sure if they lick it, it's in a carrier oil that's not toxic, like a coconut oil or an olive oil base. And it should be fine to do that. You can also just use ice therapy. You can just use ice. And then or alternate with that with heat, like a warm heating pad and ice, and that's going to be great as well.
Yeah. And I know you offer chiropractic and laser treatments at the vet clinic. There are some handheld little lasers that pet owners can buy, like on Amazon. I have one, as a matter of fact, but I haven't used it a whole lot. So are they effective? I think
there's so many products out there. It's really hard to say in general. I think they can be, and I think anything that improves the blood flow to an area is good, whether it's red light, laser, PEMF, heat, ice, where ice basically is bringing in blood flow by constricting all the blood vessels. Then when you take it off, it brings in fresh blood. So all those things are changing the circulation basically to the area. So I think they can be helpful. Yeah.
What are natural ways to just ease arthritis, like joint pain?
Super common problem in the pet population. And the first thing is anti-inflammatory diet. That's number one. And we've talked about that a lot, getting them on less of the carb-based kibble and on more protein-based and fresh foods really makes a huge difference. It's not something that's going to work right away, but as a long-term strategy, that's really good. That's a good preventative strategy too. The other thing is weight loss. So many pets are overweight and owners don't even realize it, and so keep your pet as lean as you feel comfortable. Don't be afraid to fast them one day a week. Don't be afraid to do intermittent fasting or feed only one time a day if you're struggling with keeping their weight down. Don't overfeed starchy treats or starchy table scraps. That is really the number one longevity strategy that you can do for your pet, and it's going to really help with their joint inflammation and staving off arthritis formation too.
Is wet food more fattening?
Canned food in general, is that what you're referring to? Canned food? Canned food versus dry generally can be lower in carbs. So if I had to choose one or the other, I would probably choose the canned over the dry for that reason. And they're getting more moisture. It's still high heat processed, so it's still not as good as a fresh diet in terms of the inflammatory, effect on the body. But it's probably, in my opinion, better than a kibble. A traditional kibble.
Yeah. I asked a holistic pet parent group that I'm in if you could ask a holistic veterinarian anything, what would you ask them? And a lot of people commented in that thread, talk about food, talk about diet, talk about how kibble is deadly. And I was so happy that so many people are aware that diet matters. Yeah, because I learned that from you. They were 100% on kibble before I met you.
Yeah, and I think saying that it's deadly might be an exaggeration. It's just not optimal, right? They're not gonna die from kibble, but they will potentially have more inflammation, and that is going to lead to more problems as they age. A shorter health span, more inflammatory conditions like arthritis, like lipomas, dental disease, even though that's, people think that they need the kibble for their teeth cleaning purposes, but that's kind of a myth in my opinion. So it's just not optimal. It's not an optimal diet.
I think they're referring more to the longevity of life.
Correct.
Will be longer. Correct. If you don't think.
In general, and I think there's more and more science coming out about that to support that statement. And it's kind of common sense. I mean,
it is,
right?
You just go with the motions, and we're programmed just buy kibble. Okay, well, it's high quality kibble,
right? And a lot of these kibbles are really expensive. So from a cost standpoint, you could actually almost afford to do a fresh diet for just as much, same amount of money. Yes. Yeah.
Because I would get them the most expensive kibble. Now I don't buy kibble at all, but I'm spending the same exact amount.
Yeah. So there's options now, which is great. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is there a certain diet that a pet parent should focus on for mobility reasons? Like if their pup's getting a little older and a little slower, then what should they consider feeding them?
Other than what we just mentioned, less kibble, less carbs, less body weight, possibly some intermittent fasting. I really love high dose fish oil or omega-3s if they'll tolerate it. That's been scientifically proven to really help with joint inflammation for us too. And it has other health benefits for brain, eye, kidney health, heart health. So that's kind of a great superfood to use. Glucosamine, chondroitin, hyaluronic acid, MSM, herbs like boswellia and ginger, turmeric. We mentioned apple cider vinegar, bone broth for collagen and minerals. So those are all things there's lots of things that can really help with joints that you can stack together depending on your budget and what the animal likes and what's easy for you to do and what's going to be sustainable long term. And a lot of these things you don't necessarily think about. You don't have to do the same thing every day. You don't have to do the same diet every day for most pets. In fact, I recommend a variety, rotational feeding to encourage microbiome diversity. And same thing with our supplements. We don't have to give the same supplements every day. We can rotate them. If you're traveling or your work schedule's busy and you only have time to do home cooking or fresh foods on the weekend, that's certainly better than nothing. Right. Same thing with your supplements. Don't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't, sustain doing these supplements every day. Just do it when you can, and some's better than none.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What are some common causes for itchy skin, and what are some natural remedies?
Itchy skin's a big one. I think it's certainly multifactorial, and it's a complicated issue. In the area that we're in, the Sacramento Valley, Central Valley, California, allergies are pretty bad for people and animals. We have a lot of tree species, we have a lot of poor air quality, and so environmental allergens are top of the list. But certainly food sensitivities, inflammatory foods can play a role. Mm-hmm. So the kibbles that are high in grains, that are high glyphosate crops, such as corn, wheat, and even the legumes like chickpeas and lentils can be high in glyphosates. So if you're feeding a kibble that has a lot of that in it, that could even be a culprit. Chicken is a common cause of itchy skin in animals, I find. Mm-hmm. And I think that the reason for that is that the commercially, raised chicken are fed corn and soy that's high in omega-6s, and then that creates inflammation. So environmental and food sources for sure. Mm-hmm. Certainly fleas, look at that. There's some animals that are flea allergic. So they just get one flea bite. You may not even see the flea, and they'll itch for weeks. So certainly talk to your vet about ruling out flea issues. Those are the cases that you may need to go back and use those chemical-based flea meds for a while to kind of break the cycle and see what benefits you get. Sometimes animals can itch for neurologic reasons. They can itch sometimes they'll lick their paws because they're actually anxious, and that's a self-soothing behavior. Yeah. But usually it's environmental and or food or a combo of those things, with a slight little smattering of flea allergy mixed in. Mm-hmm. And those are all somewhat manageable. I do think that more frequent bathing, if you suspect environmental allergies to be a concern for your pet. Cats, of course, are harder, but for dogs, if you can bathe them more frequently, even up to 1 or 2 times a week during pollen season, that can really help to reduce their exposure. Mm-hmm. Doing HEPA filters in your house to clean the air helps a lot. And even looking at, your yard and maybe doing foot dips for the animals when they come back into the house from being outside to rinse their feet. Mm-hmm. That can help a lot, especially if they tend to lick their feet a lot. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a tricky problem, and it's complex, but also super common that we have to deal with a lot in the veterinary space. People tend to get the more upper respiratory symptoms with environmental allergies, but and dogs and cats can get those symptoms, and red eyes and runny nose and sneezing and allergic lung issues, but the vast majority manifest as skin inflammation. Yeah. So that's common. Yeah. Are there any DIY like shampoos or herbal rinses or soaks or anything that you would recommend? I really just like the Castile soap, just as an easy shampoo. They are oil based, but super gentle, mild. Don't get the peppermint one, because if it gets in their eyes, it could be a little bit burny. Okay. But yeah, you can just use the Castile soap, and that's super natural and non-toxic. Wow. And cheap. I had no idea. Yeah. And what about foot baths? Same thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, foot baths, you can do that. You can do apple cider vinegar. You can use your own, if they get itchy ears, you can use diluted apple cider vinegar as an ear rinse. Mm-hmm. And that has some mild antifungal properties also. And you can do that on the feet as well. Okay. And that, again, a lot of times they get yeast overgrowth in their skin in their feet. So the vinegar is going to physically remove pollens, but it also will help to be a mild antifungal. What about iodine? Iodine we use a lot with the horses. Okay. Specifically. It's a natural antimicrobial. So that one would be okay too, especially if they have a lot of rashes, skin rashes, you can do a dilute iodine rinse.
Okay,
Yep.
a rinse, not a topical. You don't leave it on.
You can. There's iodine ointments that you can buy, but it's not as commonly used because it tends to stain.
I was going to say.
So that's why it's more used for the horses.
Yeah.
Than the dogs and cats. Yeah.
They're outside.
Yeah. You don't want that on your carpet.
Right. Or your bed sheets.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about dry skin? Do these soaks help with dry skin as well?
Not so much. I would suggest for that problem, I mean, you can use topical moisturizers like if it's just located on the feet or extremities or ears, you could use coconut oil or topical vitamin E as a moisture or castor oil. Castor oil is a little sticky, but that works really well as a humectant. If it's more systemic and they have flaky skin everywhere, then you're probably looking at some kind of deficiency in fatty acids. And then I would look toward more of your healthy fats. So your omega-3s, your fish oils, maybe some ghee, maybe some coconut oil, maybe a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And that usually helps a lot too, but it takes time.
Go to the root.
Yeah, but that will take a minimum of 2 to 4 weeks to really start to see an improvement. But yeah, that's a great one and super healthy.
Yeah, for sure. Don't expect an overnight result, but they'll be happy in the long term.
Yep.
So you mentioned activated charcoal for diarrhea.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you would recommend for digestive issues or?
Yeah, the sort of traditional dogma has always been chicken and rice when they get an upset stomach, bland diet. I think there's probably a better way to handle that, in my opinion, because some dogs and cats don't do well with chicken. So I would actually just do, if they are having mild vomiting or diarrhea where it's not so concerning that you need veterinary attention, you're just trying to manage it on your own. Like if an animal's vomiting multiple times in a day, you need to seek veterinary care. But if they occasionally are vomiting here or there and you want to try something at home, you can try fasting them for a day or just giving them raw goat's milk or bone broth for a day or two just to rest their GI tract. And I think that might be even a better strategy than the chicken and the rice.
Okay.
You can also make just a congee, which is a rice porridge where you cook the rice with double the amount of water and you cook it a little extra so it starts to really break down the rice starch and it makes almost like a porridge. And that's super binding and soothing and easy to digest.
And you mentioned white rice is better than brown rice.
Yes. Brown rice has more arsenic and toxins and anti-nutrients. So if you are going to use brown rice, I would definitely soak it overnight in some apple cider vinegar to help to break down that extra outer shell before you cook it. The other thing you can do for upset tummies is just some ginger. You can make a ginger tea, you can feed some fresh ginger, you can do chamomile tea. And even coconut water is a natural electrolyte and very easy to digest, gives them a little bit of nutrition while you're doing that sort of partial resting of the GI tract.
I just got an image of a dog having a cup of chamomile tea. That's so cute.
Out of a saucer.
Yeah.
And then bone broth, of course, too.
Oh, right.
Could be super healing to the gut.
Yeah, for sure. What about hairballs for cats?
I think that hairballs, there are some more toxic, in my opinion, over-the-counter products that you can buy that are petroleum-based that lubricate the GI tract. And so I would try to avoid those if you can. I like slippery elm as an alternative, but really also looking at why can't they digest the hair? Certainly if there's a long-haired cat that just is shedding a lot during a certain time of the year, that's one thing. But if a cat's chronically vomiting hairballs, then it makes me wonder if there's something weakened with their digestive system. Maybe they need some psyllium, maybe they need some probiotics, maybe we need to look at the diet. That can be a red flag that they can't process the fiber because it should be, that is a part of their natural diet in the wild, right? Is hair.
100%.
So, food for thought on that one.
For sure. Yeah. And then what about cat litter? What would you recommend?
That is a good question. There's so many products out there. If you have a cat, the best one is probably the clay-based litters for a lot of cats, but those can create a lot of dust. But that's kind of the most non-toxic one out there and the least allergenic. But they can create a lot of dust. So particularly if you have a cat box with a lid on it, that's going to potentially create more respiratory stress on the animal, right? Because they're kicking up the dust and breathing in.
Yeah.
So then you might want to look at like a dust-free litter. There's pine-based ones, there's corn-based ones, but I had a cat the other day that was having an allergic reaction on its face, and it was on a corn-based litter. So then we looked at changing to the clay-based because that's more hypoallergenic. So it really just depends on what's going on. But then if you have a cat with asthma or respiratory issues, you probably don't want to use a dusty litter. You want to use a dust-free litter. So, and there's different ones for different conditions depending on the circumstance. There's even ones that contain herbs like catnip that attract the cats to the litter so that they're less likely to go outside the litter box.
Okay.
So if you have cats that are having that problem, you can try the cat attracting litter.
That was actually going to be my next question is how do you, if a cat or a dog isn't potty trained, how can you deter them from like marking the same spot or marking their territory in general?
That's a tough one. I usually have people use the enzymatic based cleaners to try to break up as much of the ammonia crystals as you can, get the smell out as much as you can, but it's really hard, especially with cat urine.
Yeah.
Once that's there, you kind of have to like change the flooring and start from scratch.
Get a new cat. I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's a hard one, but once that smell's there, you're kind of in trouble. So you kind of have to start over.
What role do probiotics and fermented foods play in gut health for pets?
I think that's a little bit, probiotics are certainly mainstream now, and even the traditional vets are using probiotics, which is great. I think they're not always the answer in certain circumstances. Certainly it's great to do post-antibiotic use or for short term. But I don't know that it's the best thing to use as a long-term solution. I think it's more post-antibiotics, post-diarrhea, or during diarrhea, those types of things. Fermented foods, on the other hand, might be something to work into the diet as a variety food. I think that there's some benefit there. They can be high in histamines, so if you have a dog or cat that has a reaction to that, you might want to think about a histamine sensitivity. But I really like raw green tripe as a good fermented food, natural fermented food. It's got, and you can buy that directly from certain food companies. Yeah. And it's a little stinky. Yeah. It smells like cow poop. It's kind of gross, but they like it. But they like it, and it's really they love it, and it's a great GI tonic. Yeah. And also I really like goat's milk kefir, so fermented goat's milk. Mm-hmm. And you can make that yourself. Actually, you can buy goat's milk and you can buy the kefir grains if you want to get handy and make it yourself even. And that's great for us. And the goat's milk is going to be easier to digest than cow milk. Okay. Interesting. So those are my favorite fermented foods, but you can use fermented vegetables as well. Sauerkraut, a little bit of sauerkraut's probably okay as long as it doesn't have onions in it. Okay. You can ferment, you can ferment any vegetables. You can pickle any vegetable that you want, except for onions, and incorporate that into their diet. Carrots, zucchinis, whatever, cucumbers, and just little bits. They don't need a lot, but that's a great way too.
What is a little bit?
Oh, I would say for the average medium to large dog, you could feed a couple tablespoons of fermented vegetables a day, something like that.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And back to the tripe, I have bought canned tripe and freeze-dried tripe. Okay. Is there a difference?
Freeze-dried is not heat processed. So if it's canned, is that green? Canned green tripe, or was it?
The can was green.
So tripe is the cow's first stomach. Okay. It's a fermentation vat. So they eat the grass, and the bacteria in there start to ferment the grass. So when you get the raw green tripe, you're getting the organ as well as the fermented grass and the bacteria, the healthy bacteria. So it is really a superfood. It's an organ meat and it's a fermented vegetable. Essentially, it's fermented grass in there. Okay. If you buy it at the grocery store and it's white, they washed it all the nutrients and probably bleached it too. So then you're taking out a lot of the nutrition. And if it's in a can, then it's been heat processed, so it's killed all the bacteria, or it's been washed before. If it's freeze dried and it's not been washed, then that's probably okay.
Okay.
But I think your most nutrient benefits are going to be from the raw green form.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I remember buying it and telling the person at the pet food store how much my dog loves it, and they just said, well, don't replace it as their meal because it's not a meal replacement. I'm like, okay. So talking about anxiety and fireworks and rainstorms, thunder, how would you recommend a natural way to calm a pet?
That's a tricky one. There are a lot of natural products out there that have blends of different herbs, neurotransmitters, even medicinal mushrooms that I've used with some success. And CBD, of course, is a big one that we use a lot in animals and people for anxiety.
Yeah.
That's probably the most beneficial, but I haven't, that's great for the milder cases, I think.
Yeah.
I think in the severe cases, you really need pharmaceuticals for short-term emergency uses, right? So your gabapentin, trazodone, even alprazolam, which is Xanax. Those are the 3 big ones that we use in veterinary medicine usually that work pretty well. And I feel like they're okay for short-term use, right? Sometimes that's better than having the animal stressed and then getting diarrhea and scratching up the walls or running away and getting hurt, getting lost. So, but yes, there's a lot of natural products: valerian root, passion flower, L-tryptophan, and the CBD. Reishi mushroom is really great for anxiety.
Okay.
Yep.
I had a cat who she just took a turn mentally and she became very aggressive, and I loved her. She was probably like 9 years old when this happened, and she was prescribed straight up Xanax. It wasn't even like the pet form. It was straight up Xanax. And I remember she was so dopey at first. I'm like, there's one baby. But then she got used to it, and
it worked for her.
It did very short term.
Yeah.
She got used to it.
Yeah.
And she just started reacting again, even on Xanax.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And what about thunder shirts? I've seen those, but I've never tried them before.
Those are garments that you buy. They're for dogs, but I don't know if they have them for cat. I probably would work for a cat too.
It's just pressure. Right?
Yeah, it's the same concept as swaddling an infant.
Yeah.
So it's a tight body wrap, and it just has a calming effect on the nervous system, and they can work really well. So sometimes you can stack that onto your herbal remedies. Also, I didn't mention like the homeopathic flower essences. So there's the Bach flower rescue remedy.
Rescue remedies.
There's the 5 flower essences. Those can be, sometimes they don't work, but sometimes they're really profound. It really depends on the animal's constitution. So that stacked on with a thunder shirt or some CBD, maybe some calming music. Sometimes they like music.
Yeah.
And try those things, natural things first before you go to the pharmaceuticals, but then always have the pharmaceuticals as a backup, I think, if you have a really anxious animal.
I would imagine the thunder shirts are likened to like a weighted blanket.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It calms the pressure receptors in the skin, has some calming effect on the brain, and puts the body more into that parasympathetic state.
Yeah. And I've had really good experience in the past with giving rescue remedy to my pets. I just put a few drops in their water dish, and I've noticed a difference. Yeah. It does take a few days.
And it can be subtle.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, you didn't react like you would have in the pet,
Yeah. Yeah. And they're super safe, gentle, inexpensive. So yeah, for sure.
And what about essential oils?
I've used certainly essential oils for calming. I think they can help. Lavender, of course, is a known calming oil, probably the most famous, and that works well. I would direct pet parents to a website called Animal EO, which is Dr. Melissa Shelton's essential oil line specifically made for pets. She's a veterinarian that's done a ton of research and has a ton of experience with essential oils. And And she has some calming blends on her website that you can buy. And you have to be a little careful with the oils in cats in particular. There's some that can be toxic to their liver if they are not distilled properly. And so you really want to make sure you are working with a company that knows what they're doing in terms of pet formulation. And that's really the best company out there that I know of.
And she has more than just anxiety relief.
She has natural pest repellents products. She has stuff for, your joint pain. She has tumor reducers, topical tumor reducers, which I've used, called Dump a Lump. So she's got some great stuff on there. Yeah. I would really encourage people to check that out.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Takes the guesswork out.
Yep.
I know you already know this, but one time I had my diffuser right above my dog toy box, and I didn't realize, or I didn't connect, that it was obviously dripping into the toy box, and he started getting sick. He was just vomiting, and I brought him into you. I'm like, what's going on? And he had no other signs. So I remember you being like, I have no idea. You're asking me all the questions, but nothing's connecting.
Yeah.
And then when I came home and saw that, I moved the diffuser and he stopped getting sick. And I did take all of the top layers of, he has a lot of toys. So I took the top layer off and washed them all, and he never got sick again.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that oils, essential oils, we have to use them with caution for sure with pets. And just think about, like, essentially, especially if you're diffusing in the house, think about where you're diffusing, and maybe don't do that around the cats, and don't do it around things that they're going to ingest, obviously. And try to use that like more minimally, I think, because we don't really know, about the long-term effects of using the oils in the pets.
In that oil company that you just mentioned, she has oils that you can diffuse as well as oils formulated just to put topically on your pet.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. She has some that are neat, ready to use, and then there's some that are for diluted purposes.
Awesome. What are some common household products that either you can make that are safe for pets, or ones that are really toxic to pets? Two-part question.
I would avoid anything synthetic, of course. I mean, it goes without saying, but Febreze, Glade plugins, synthetic candles, those are all super toxic. Artificial scents in detergents, dryer sheets, all of those things can be super noxious and toxic to pets because they're right down in there breathing it more so than we are, right? So I would stick with all the natural things. There's so many products out there that are clean and easy to obtain now. You can make your own recipes now for floor cleaners with vinegar-based floor cleaners. You can make even natural dishwasher detergent and laundry detergents, or purchase them. Borax is a super non-toxic multi-use cleaning product that I like to add as like a laundry booster. You can even bathe pets in borax. Or yourself. So I think, just common sense, right? Like, don't use anything with the synthetic dyes or chemicals. It's better for us too.
Yeah. I was using dryer sheets, and they were unscented, whatever. I just like, because, my dogs have a lot of blankets, whatever. And then I saw that that's toxic to dogs. Are the unscented ones as well? Because I stopped using them altogether.
I think there's a residue. Don't quote me on this, but I think there's some plastics, right? Microplastics.
Yeah, it can't be good.
Right.
Like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, what am I thinking?
Yeah, I like the wool dryer balls work really well. All right. And you can even take those and put, if you want some fragrance, put some natural organic, like from Dr. Shelton's line, essential oils onto the dryer balls, and they'll fluff up your laundry and they'll reduce the static, and they work great. And they're reusable, better for the environment.
Are there any situations that pet owners should not rely on DIY solutions?
If the animal is occasionally vomiting, maybe once a day, and it's feeling fine and it wants to eat, that's probably not a veterinary emergency. If they're vomiting multiple times in a day, they're vomiting blood, they have blood in the stool or bloody diarrhea, you definitely want to call your vet. You don't want to try to manage that at home. Right. If they are having trouble breathing, if they're having blood from, they have a bleeding wound, that's excessive. Really severe itching, that's creating a wound, a hot spot that's getting worse. You don't want to try to manage that because those can get really nasty and infected. And if they're not eating for more than a day, those are all times that you don't want to try to DIY it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can you tell if a wound is getting infected?
So if it has excessive redness, drainage, discharge, smelly, painful, those are all signs.
Call the vet.
Yep.
Well, this has been really fun. Are there any other things that I didn't ask you about that you use at home or that you find yourself recommending?
Yeah, I don't really have nothing else I can really think of, but certainly if listeners have questions, they can write in and we can try to answer any questions that come up.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
You're just a wealth of information.
Yeah, it's great.
So
great
fun.
chatting.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for tuning in. And please subscribe so that you can learn more tips and tricks. And we have, these episodes that are focused on your pets, but we also are interviewing a lot of people who work in the holistic wellness field for people. So if you know someone that we should interview, let us know. Whether they work with pets or people, we are open to it. And have a great rest of your day.